Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Cosmic Wizard Show. Here we're going to be talking about general spiritual development, mysticism, study, and practice of magic in all ways, with a definite heavy lean towards constellational or true sidereal astrology. I'm going to be reaching out to a lot of people who are actually practicing this to chat with them. Today we've got a talk with Michael Hartigan from One Sky Astrology that I'm super excited about. We go on for a long time, but it's a good listen if you are interested in this topic. Check the show notes below for resources that we mention. And I'm also looking for people to talk to. So if you have something cool that you got going on, reach out to me. We can get you on the show, especially if you're an astrologer who is currently doing something outside the framework of mainstream tropical astrology. I want to talk to you, especially if you, come from perhaps a culture outside of mainstream tropical astrology. Like, I'd love to talk to maybe some indigenous people about star stories. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. If you guys know anyone, if you want to talk to me, reach out and we'll see what we can do. Thanks for tuning in, and here comes the episode. All right. Well, we're here on the first ever show of the Cosmic Wizard Show. And I'm here speaking with Michael Hartigan from One Sky Astrology. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Ria. Nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to talk to you. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your journey with astrology, how you got into it, how you got into what you're doing today, that sort of thing.
Oh, wow. Well, the short version is my godmother was an astrologer, and it turns out that my mom was really into astrology, and then she had kids, and just kind of like she wasn't that into astrology, but she was. When I got into it, she was like, oh yeah, and like she and I can talk about stuff, talk about charts, talk about signs, and
Oh, that's cool.
everybody's whatnot. But my godmother, I met her when I was probably in I think just around my 19th birthday. She has a school of astrology, holistic astrology in Brussels, they called the Archetypical. I forget how you say astrology in French, but it's archetypical astrology school. And her whole life was astrology, and she's a tropical practitioner, but she just really got me kind of hip to the language, the archetypes, the whole idea that a psyche had these facets. The inner world was reflected in the outer world, and so on. And it really took, like, I got a hook in my jaw. I got dragged up the river. I was like, whoa, this is cool. But I really never felt like certain parts of my chart. Like in a lot of ways, I kind of fought with it. And I discovered along the way, I discovered sidereal, like Vedic sidereal. And then a student of Athen Chimentes, a person I actually just saw yesterday, walked past where she worked, and we waved to each other. Her name's Alicia. She's at Tides of Io, astrology. I'd actually have to look it up. I don't want to misquote her site, but maybe maybe if you hadn't sprung this on me last minute, I would have been a little bit prepared. This is a super secret surprise. Like, oh hey, let's do a show. We were just so I just got the memo about 5 minutes ago. Anyway, Alicia was like, oh yeah, well, I'm doing something like totally sidereal. It's like not even really using a zodiac, just the actual skies. And there's this guy, Athen. I started to get tuned into this. And she read my chart, and it was just like, it was kind of the missing piece of my astrological puzzle. I really felt like everything resonated the whole way around. So I actually went to Athens, saved up some money, and was like, "Bro, let's do this. Let's do this damn thing." And
For the course or for a reading?
no, I've actually in the course of working in the course of working with him, we've talked a little about my own chart, but I've never actually sat down with him and had a proper reading. Probably because I'm wanted to spend my money on the classes,
Yeah.
and I'm also pretty confident in my own skills. Although Athens, great. Athens, there's Athens a wizard. His approach is there's a reason he has like 60,000 subscribers. There's like he's just able to just break things down to their pith essence. It's really interesting to watch him kind of do his thing. So yeah, I started to get really familiar, kind of shore up the kind of the differences, and talk to him firsthand about the whole 13 constellation zodiac. And he and I, we sort of, we share probably 95% common ground. And then, we have our own interpretations of stuff and emphasis on things, and where we differ. And that's cool. I hope so. Yeah, of course. And, yeah, so I've been out there, in the professional world as a practicing astrologer, like kind of hanging my sign since, 2018, so it's about 3 years. And so doing the true sidereal thing, also focusing on Jeffrey Wolf Green's Evolutionary Astrology, which yeah, I came into contact with through Mark Jones at the Pluto School, which is just, we could rap about that. It's mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah. Well, last year I did a course that was really based on evolutionary astrology with Sabrina Monarch.
Oh yeah.
And I noticed that you, on your website and stuff like that, mentioned that you had done some evolutionary astrology. So I thought that was interesting.
Oh yeah. Powerful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Although for me, like, it seems not necessarily tied in with that school of astrology. It seems that like the real evolutionary step to take with astrology is by, going back to the basics and looking at the stars, and maybe even with the seasons, maybe there's a reason why it's shifting on us. That's a whole different rabbit hole I could get down that I don't want to start at this moment, but
no, there's so many rabbit holes. I'll let you sort of guide this the way you have, maybe you have a vision. Maybe we could just go down random tangents, but
we could just go down random tangents. That's fun. Well, I was inspired to invite you on first because your video about the astronomy is really, I've been exploring sidereal for a while, and just sort of tracking transits on my own for like 2 years. And I got to the point where I was like, wow, like the stars actually matter, And then at that point I had to question, well, if the stars actually matter, then don't like all the stars matter? And doesn't it matter, how within the range anyways,
Yeah.
And maybe it does make a difference that some are bigger and some are smaller and that sort of thing. But I had all of these questions that I sort of just chalked up to like not understanding the astronomy of it, and watching your video on astronomy really just like sunk down everything that I needed to know to really jump in and start exploring this deeper. So
that's awesome.
Talking with me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, that's really cool.
One rabbit hole that I wanted to go down, we've been talking on Facebook a little bit, and you were saying that the Tropical Zodiac is sort of like a Funhouse Mirror. And I thought that's something we could dive on for a while.
I'm different from a lot of my cohort in that a lot of people are still trying to make sense of tropical. They're like, oh, but but it works with the seasons, or they're like, oh, but it's, I've examined this, and to my satisfaction, I've come to the conclusion that tropical is broken. I'll just go on kind of a record as saying I really think the language is very powerful. Like the understanding of the archetypes is, there's a reason there was like the popularity of this story of a guy with 12 followers, because the sidereal mythology take Jesus, this whole Krishna Horus mythos through time. It reflects an actual reality, right? And to the extent that a mythology taps us into an actual reality, it has real power. And the language and the system, the structure of tropical astrology has actual like correlation, and it has power. Like if you look at yourself through the lens of, oh, there are these 12 sort of distinct components of my psyche and a journey around the wheel that we make, like as beings in a growth pattern, and these planets like correlate to urges and impulses, perceptual modalities, even chakras. You can draw all these maps, and it's actually helpful. But the tropical system originated with, back around the time of Christ. People really thought, because Aristotle taught this, well, not everybody universally thought this, but because Aristotle had such a deep voice, and he was so handsome, I guess. No, he was a very capable philosopher, of course, but he thought the Earth was the fixed and unmoving center of the entire universe, and that everything rotated around it. Aristarchus of Samos knew, and his student Archimedes knew. They had the order of the planets right. They knew this was a heliocentric system, and the sun was a star, and then we were in a universe of orbiting spheres, but no one listened to them. People, kind of like when Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud went right around the discovery of Neptune, right around that time when they came out and said, oh, there's a subconscious and an unconscious. There's part of our consciousness we're not aware of. And people are like, yeah, sure, guy, get lost, And it seemed absurd because it wasn't the prevailing thought. It wasn't there was a consensus.
Well, people do the best with what they have at the time,
I agree wholeheartedly. And I don't really hold it against anyone, because even going back to the decisions that were made then, they noticed the stars moved and they thought the Earth didn't. So they oriented things to the seasons. And, because the stars move, then the tropical zodiac is shifting. And that's I'm just kind of filling people in who might be watching, who are like, oh, I don't know, true sidereal, what's that? And how's it relate to tropical? And why is this guy talking smack on my astrology? Well, that's why. And so we were having this conversation on Facebook, and first I want to acknowledge the power, the psychological and practical ground level kind of agency in the language and the system of astrology, tropical, sidereal, true sidereal, or whatever. But I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and she was like, oh, Virgos drive me nuts. And I'm like, what drives you nuts about Virgos? They're so self-centered, they're always so selfish. And I'm like, sounds like Leo, which is now that Leo's been shifted, it occupies what we call Virgo. So what maps onto tropical Virgo is the stars of Leo. And to what you were saying earlier, Rio, the stars are really important. The stars are actually, groups of stars are actually where all of the ideas that were resurrected during the Renaissance came from. because this wasn't like a gradual shift. Like they made this decision, then the Roman Empire fell, then the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church, and then we're like 500 years right now out of a renaissance, of resurrection of all this stuff. And it's like what happened? We're like waking up from this like really bad dream in in the modern Western world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even now we're like putting together some of these important pieces. And I think that recognizing that all of the Ptolemaic ideas about the signs, like everything you read in like the only astrology book you'll ever need, or some of the like really like grounded in classic works on astrology, all that stuff goes back to when they were looking at a sidereal. There's the tropical thing.
Astronomers.
They were,
that's
right.
the part that gets me. This idea that it was like very on purpose to change it to the seasons. Why would a bunch of astronomers do that?
Right.
I think it was just a mistake.
I really think it's kind of a fundamental ignorance issue. They if you fast forward like 12,000 years, they'll tell you that Aquarius, what's the stars Aquarius? That's where Leo will be. Pisces is where Virgo will be, and people will say, "Oh, Pisces drive me nuts," and it won't because they're Leos. It'll be because they're Pisces. And they'll be diffused and dreamy and confused, and they'll be, "Oh, Virgos are so dreamy and confused." What? Like now we can't comprehend it. But if the tropical zodiac continues to shift, it's like, how far do you want to take this thing? Because
we can just course correct.
Yeah. So I really sort of disregard it. And in my studies, I've learned to just kind of go back a sign. It's like when people are talking about, I don't know. I meet a lot of people who are like, I'm an Aries, but they're such a Pisces.
Yep. The one that's getting me right now is everyone talking about how they're feeling like so emotional and it's Pisces season. And is it Pisces season, or is the sun just coming up on a conjunction to Neptune?
Right. And there's all kinds of complexity, and I think there's one of the reasons people tend to feel like they're tropical signs, because I get this a lot, like people will really relate to that, is because the people's progressed planets, secondary progressions, move through they move forward, so that's moving through the forward sign or the tropical sign. So say you were, had a self story, a narrative around, I'm an Aries. I'm boisterous and blunt and straightforward and tough, but the sun was really squarely in Pisces when you were born, giving you this really kind of sensitive, kind of pretty kind of emotional, psychic nature.
Yeah.
Very different. I choose these signs because they're really different to each other. Well, that person at around, depending on what degree of Pisces the sun is in when they're born, anywhere between age 1, 2, 3 to so astronomically Pisces is almost like 40 some degrees. So we could say at some point in their life, their progressed sun is going to go through an Aries phase. They're going to have the internal experience of a sun in Aries, a progressed sun. And it's going to help them relate to that like brash kind of, driven forward, and they'll be like, oh, wow, I'm an Aries. And in a lot of people's journey, I've noticed that progressed sun as a sort of inner experience. As it shifts, people, when my progressed sun, and I'm a Virgo sun, at a point I went through a very Libran phase actually, and I was like, maybe. And then at the point in my life when I was convinced I've got to be a Scorpio, like that's the only thing that makes sense, my progressed sun was moving through Scorpio. And I didn't realize this, so I kind of put it all together later, because secondary progressions aren't something you really get on the internet or commonly.
Well, even in the natal chart, right? Because Mercury and Venus are reasonably close. Like there is a good chance that people have this energy in their chart. Like for me,
Absolutely.
my tropical chart, I was a Leo sun, Cancer Venus, and Virgo moon. And in sidereal or true sidereal, I switched to like Virgo rising, Cancer sun, Leo moon.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like, some people might be like, well, is that just semantics? But no, it is an important shift, even though all of the energies are still at play.
Right, right. And what you're pointing to is just a perfect example of how like nuanced and complicated and holistic a chart is, and how on the one hand, it's really silly to just talk about sun signs anyway, even though we do it, and it does have a effect on a core sense of self. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons. Sun with, or especially with in conjunction or in trine to a planet really closely, will really flavor the experience, like in that way. This person could be Pisces, but Mars might be right there with it, and they'll just double down on the Aries story. But from my experience with charts, the actual astronomical astrology, the true sidereal zodiac, it's like the only thing that I've seen that works like all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely found a lot more resonance now, especially that I've started looking at more charts, not just my own too. It just makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Do you have a practice? Are you out there like
I
doing
am,
chart
yeah.
readings? And cool.
I'm sort of just starting.
Good
I have
trade.
been studying for a long time and reading for friends and stuff for a long time, but I've started hanging my
Nice.
sign, as it were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's trade.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll work it out later.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
work it out later, but that sounds fun.
yeah, cool.
I'm really curious what you think about this Age of Aquarius thing that's been going on.
Oh wow. Yeah.
'Cause,
Because people think that's happening now.
yeah,
Yeah.
which as far
And
as I'm open to being wrong, but as far as I can understand, whether we're talking tropical, sidereal, or anything, that's just not true.
no, I don't even think it's true tropically. I
No,
mean,
I
I
don't.
could open my software, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
We're in an astronomical sense, the
Mhm.
sun is rising on I just looked actually earlier today. The sun rises on the vernal equinox
Yeah.
late, or actually this precesses. So it's actually moving backwards. So early
Okay.
in Pisces,
Yeah.
maybe 6 or 7 degrees in, I think. And it won't rise. The sun isn't going to rise in the stars of Aquarius, in the northern hemisphere vernal equinox, for another almost like 750. So we're, I mean, technically, we're not even on the cusp of the age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
And part of what marks Pisces is confusion and self-deception, sort of denial, delusion. Like it's a very cloudy thing.
I think it's really
Um,
interesting that Neptune is in Aquarius while this is all going on,
mhm.
you
In a
know?
critical degree, in the last degree, constellationally.
Oh,
Absolutely.
really? Ah.
So wrapping up that idea of moving forward, of moving into the future, like the first and last degrees, the critical degrees are like really poignant expressions of an energy.
Mm.
So this is like, one way of looking at that would be like we'd get the delusion, Neptune, that we were moving forward into the future, like in a like a really meaningful way, like we could feel that, right? Like
Mhm.
deeply, Neptune. And it's collective, it's a collective influence.
Mhm.
And in the 60s, people thought that was the dawning of the cusp of the age of Aquarius. They thought that was really like, that was what started it. And I
Mhm.
think in 65, Pluto and Uranus conjoined in constellation Leo, if I'm not mistaken, and about 65.
Oh,
So
okay.
the energies of Uranus ruling Aquarius were emphasized and deepened by
Mm.
Pluto's conjunction. And this, and Leo brought, radical, new, very off the beaten path and rebellious forms of creative self-exploration.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we saw that in the 60s, but it wasn't, it just categorically, like, the sun isn't rising in Aquarius. It's
Mm.
not.
Yeah.
So I don't know where tropical puts that, but the nice thing about being in the kind of tropical is broken camp is I don't even I don't
Yeah.
I don't have to follow two different systems.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm. Let's see. Well, that's all I had for like notes of stuff that I wanted to bring out. So, I mean, now we're just free to rabbit hole however we want, really.
Uh-oh.
Maybe I guess a useful question to ask would be for people who are like just getting into this and wanting to explore their own charts and things like that. What are the tools you'd recommend?
Oh, wow. There are some really good web embedded, constellational true sidereal chart generators.
Mhm,
There's one on Mastering the Zodiac, Athens
mhm.
site. There's his channel, of course, Mastering the
Yeah.
Zodiac on YouTube, kind of a go-to weekly pulse. But if you want to get a chart, you can
Mhm,
generate a chart on masteringthezodiac.com. You can generate a chart on Capricorn Software's
mhm.
website, that makes Prometheus, the software that most of the constellational astrologers are using. I think Ike at Sidereal Astrologist has a chart generator, and I, on my own site, do something a little more complex, where the online embedded stuff just kind of gives you a wheel with placements.
Mhm.
I do just like a whole chart with like parallels of declination,
Oh, really?
arrangement of aspects, stellar alignments, like any star planet conjunction within like 2.5 degrees, and other stuff, and a key, and keys to all this, so you can decipher the symbols. And the price on my website for that is $10, but I do all my work on sliding scale, and I really like, endeavor to be generous. So if people just show up with $5, I'll definitely print you one. But
Okay, awesome.
it's something so that's a paid service. The others are free. Athens
Mhm.
channel is public. What else is good? Ways to get tuned into this. Ike Rodriguez at
Mhm.
Sidereal Astrologist, his webpage and his Facebook group, Sidereal Revolution, where we
And his
met.
Facebook group is awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool group. I love just sort of like I don't know. There's not, people get opinionated and throw. There's some shade. I've seen some shade thrown,
A
but
little
there's
bit.
general like, there's a real genuine like spirit of exploration, and a
Mhm,
sense of excitement, and just not and really non-judgmental kind of like
mhm,
I don't think any one person is trying to like play guru or dominate the conversation. And it just feels like whenever I present something on there or respond to something, it actually feels like, wow, this is cool.
mhm,
And that's like a great metric of like how legitimate something is. If it's not convoluted and it's not developing like massive complexes, or, or,
mhm.
or egos, or a lot of back and forth, like ankle biting and drama, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
that's just interesting.
That's something that I'd really like to foster in this, like, show that I'm endeavoring is just, like, a spirit of exploration and getting together and, building bridges of understanding.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Because I don't know, I feel like this is the future of astrology,
I do
and
too. I really straight up do.
mhm.
Um, yeah,
And, like, at the same time, it's kinda new, so we need people who are excited to just like play around and experiment, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool because everybody who's really out there doing this right now they're kind of finding their own stride.
Mm.
Like some people are just really almost like technical and very broad. Like I was saying, Athens has a really just like boils things down to the pith essence to make them like very universally available. And I mean, my approach is almost like opposite. And anyone who's seen me sort of like riff on charts knows I go like right to the therapeutic stuff. I'm like, oh man, that looks challenging, and let's like get into like these interpersonal, kind of like the kind of resolving blockages
Mm.
in our lives, kind of
That's
the
sort of where
healing
I'm at
potential.
too.
Yeah, totally, totally. And not to say that Athen doesn't do that, because he does, but just to compare the way we present, like outwardly, publicly. Um, and everyone's just kind of got their own thing, and I really think that one is the future. I really do. I think returning to the ancient origins of it is definitely where we should be, and ultimately where we'll kind of have to go.
Yeah,
I
agree.
think we have the technology. Can you believe, like in Babylon, before they made the 12 even sign zodiac, they were doing this with uneven constellations. They were doing those calculations. They were doing this by,
Yeah,
hand with like, an astrolabe and a straight edge and like a compass. And it's just like,
yeah,
holy
that's
crap,
wild.
that's wild. Now it's just like click. Okay.
Yeah. Do meet more.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But
Well, it sounded like you were going into a list because you started with one.
oh man, it's I don't know, there I had like three simultaneous thoughts. One of the thoughts was, I went back and I realized I shouted out Ike and Athen. There's a bunch of people actually doing constellational astrology. There's I actually, she has a YouTube name. It's like Ross the Star Witch.
Okay.
Her sign, her like is just I think 13 sign. She's doing something she calls 13 sign. And then there's my own site, one sky
Yeah.
astro.com. And so all of these are places you can go to get information, to learn. I have a YouTube channel too, One Sky, uh and then yeah, to the community in the sense of exploration. I think I think it's great. I hardly really see communities that are just so nurturing of like curiosity, because it is kind of like it's kind of a bleeding edge thing, and we're all sort of exploring like space together, literally. And it's like, oh my God, it just feels very genuine. It's one of the coolest things. I forget what I was making a list of at this point. It's gone.
That's okay.
Thanks.
Let me think. Is there any sort of like transits that you're super excited about that wouldn't be in like being talked about in mainstream astrology because of the tropical
Oh
funhouse
wow.
mirror?
Um, not so much because of the tropical thing, because transits don't change. Like Saturn is
Well, by
squaring
sign, I
Uranus this year.
suppose.
By sign, yeah, totally,
Mhm.
totally. It is interesting because Saturn, excuse me, Saturn is squaring Uranus this year, and it's happening from Saturn's in Capricorn, and Uranus is in Aries, and that's where
Mhm.
this whole dynamic takes place. And those star groups are both cardinal. It's cardinal fire and cardinal earth, and this is going to be the start of a new cycle. And with Capricorn, um, it's it's going to be a start of a cycle of more stability and security. Saturn in Capricorn is like,
even with Uranus being the square?
I do think so, because Uranus is going to move out of Aries into Taurus. And that's gonna be a really interesting shift. It's gonna be with Uranus square to Saturn from Aries. It's not the only thing. It's not that the only thing will be the stability of Saturn in Capricorn. And in fact, if anything, we might go through a year where Saturn's ability to express its stable, most stable side is a little challenged by the square and by Uranus. But I think the idea that is happening in cardinal stars that start whole new cycles of development is really probably the most important idea, because thinking about it happening in I think people think Uranus is in Taurus right now.
Yeah.
And then Saturn would be in Aquarius. And that's a stable, those are stable, those are fixed. Like Aquarius changes things, but
yeah,
I think it's going to be really interesting when you look at the whole flow, the transits that interest me since Jupiter and Saturn came together on the solstice last year. I mean, that was so big.
Yeah.
It's weird, we don't know like how big that's going to be. And it happened during an eclipse cycle, and just the whole context of it was like, oh, whoa, here we go. And I think what we're going to see is a restructuring of, the world. We had this, all part of the context of it was COVID. We're seeing society, broadly restructured. We're seeing a sort of, movement towards, corporate favor, and like away from, favoring the little kind of, mom and pop shops. Most of those have been kind of put out of business by Amazon, like in the last 20-year cycle.
Yeah.
And it's just like such a wild, like almost like a sci-fi kind of time where we're like teetering on, like on the one hand, we're teetering on dystopia. We're like clearly and presently like right on the cusp of like where are we going with this thing? And on the other hand, like the momentum's there, the trajectory's there, like everything. And that was why I said that Uranus moving into Taurus would be really interesting. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things to watch, because the best case scenario that could come out of that is there'll be a massive shift towards cryptocurrency and blockchain based.
Yeah, when you brought that up, actually, that was my first thought as well.
Right. Yeah, because this isn't like a gold-based, like Fort Knox has been empty since I think the 30s. Like there's like, we know money's fiat. We're making it up. And so like we have permission now. Right. So let's
system is nonsense.
It's nonsense. We just right.
I find that as we're just like going through this past year and seeing like the systems that are actually in place, it's a big part of I think it just like speaks so well to what's actually happening in the sky. Like, look around at everything's happening. This is so Capricornian themes, even just like the government control and just like the systems that we've upheld for so long that are just nonsense.
Yeah. The corporatism, the conformity, the kind of like all of that. And Jupiter and Saturn are in Cap. They're both still in Cap. And that's the crux of like temporal power, worldly power. So we're going to see that. I think the best case scenario of Uranus moving into Taurus is that there's going to be the possibility of like just generating enough money. We can have like universal basic income, if we're going to have like a nonsense, the trajectory of evolution has for a long time been towards globalism. And if we're going to have a global society, you know, let's let's at least like, you know, solve some of these, you know, if we have then like that many more resources at our disposal, instead of we're, you know, these little territorial groups and, you know, ethnic groups and nationalist groups, you know, squabbling and trying to carve out our whatever. It's like, no, if we all get on board and we all agree, like, oh, it's the future, we're just making things up. Like, let's make up enough money for everyone to actually, like, you know, that would be a best case scenario.
Yes, I agree.
And yeah, I don't like to make predictions. I just like to look at a spectrum of scenarios, you know. But Uranus makes really splashy ingresses to constellations. It's neat. So I'm expecting when Uranus hits Taurus, there's going to be, I'm telling everyone, invest in Bitcoin, invest in Ethereum.
I've been trying to tell all my family this, and I think they're starting to think I'm a little crazy. They're like, why do you keep talking to me about this computer money?
Yeah, people don't get it. It's funny.
But like Visa's accepting it next year, I think, maybe even later this year.
Yeah, I think PayPal's on board. Like it's starting, we're starting to see like the movement. And I think if you would have put $100 into it, like when it first came out and people were like Bitcoin, you'd have like yacht money now. You'd just be sitting on stacks. It's crazy what's happened already. So yeah, all of this, these transits, I think what's happening with Capricorn, the structure, and Saturn, the kind of, you know, systems and this like, you know, strongly corporate conformist kind of energy, and Uranus in Aries is it's initiating new ways for people, you know, individuals, Aries, to like, you know, almost co-create society, you know, to fit in and to do our part, their part, you know, all of our part, to kind of, I don't know, it's such a cliche to be the change you want to see in the world, but it's really true that we're kind of asked to do that. And then it goes the other way too, where like the corporations are like leveraging all their power in order to kind of mold and shape individual thought. And this is going to be resisted because Uranus resists that and is always rebellious. And I think the whole tension of the whole thing is very interesting. It's a bit different than the Taurus Aquarius dynamic. And I've heard a couple interpretations. And from the tropical point of view, and the accuracy of it seems to be based on the idea of the square between Saturn and Uranus.
Yeah.
So yeah, am I excited about anything? I think Jupiter sextiles Eris this year, also for 3 contacts. So throughout the year, it'll be nice because Eris has been. What's that?
That sounds like it'll be a shakeup.
Yeah, Eris tends to shake everything up, but Jupiter is the bringer, the teacher, the bestower of blessings, the opener of doors, and I think that we may see from like unexpected corners or strange places, or we may see just like blessings in disguise at worst, that like, you know, things get shaken up, but it's like, oh, that was good for everyone. And it, you know, it probably just would get better from there, Jupiter sextile to Eris. So I am watching that because we're learning about Eris too, right? You know, discovered in 2006.
Terribly much about Eris, but I know on your, I think it was your last video or maybe the one before, there was some Eris contacts that you were talking about.
Yeah, the last 2 cycles, lunar cycles, as we are conducting this interview, Eris is square to Pluto. And that then the sun and moon have been sort of making aspects to that. 2 new moons ago, the new moon was conjoined Pluto. And then the last new moon, there was a semi-sextile to that square from the new moon. So it's been kind of playing its role. Eris is Eris. For people who might not be familiar, can I just say a little
Go for
about
it.
Eris? Eris was the only Greek, Eris was the only Greek goddess that had no temples. Like the Greeks did not like Eris whatsoever. She is the goddess of discord and of chaos. And her main contribution to Greek mythology was starting the Trojan War, by sort of subtly initiating, kind of playing on the egotism of the big gods, and sort of getting them to bicker and fight amongst each other, and then this led to the Trojan War. But Eris was named by Mike Brown, at the astronomer who discovered it. Eris was named after it was seen what kind of effect like this discovery had, because Mike Brown gets it. He's a neat guy. And in astrology, one of the principles, like we were talking about Neptune being discovered, and then Jung and Freud being like, oh yeah, depth psychology and so on. This, I think Uranus discovery coincides with I think the 7 Years War and American Revolution. Pluto with plutonium, actually, atom bombs, and the death of the two world wars, and the depression, all kind of plutonian stuff. So there's an idea in astrology, when we discover something, a new planet, a new body, it's reflected in the psyche, that this is then brought to the conscious, to the forefront of the experience, right? And Eris dethroned Pluto. Eris is about the size of Pluto. They're both about the size of Earth's moon. And when Eris was discovered, people were like, oh, we can't just have all these planets. And then there was a big argument about what is a planet anyway. And it had never been defined, actually. The International Astronomers Union didn't have a definition for planets. So they sat down and had a lot of discussions about what's a planet. They decided, well, Pluto's not even a planet. So let's get this all out of here. And Mike Brown was just like,
isn't Pluto back a planet now?
Oh, I don't think so.
No. Okay.
I think Pluto's technically a dwarf planet. So there's planet in there. The IAU defined a planet as something that clears its path of all smaller obstacles. And Pluto's part of a sort of a cluster of smaller bodies and debris. Outside the orbit of Neptune, there's just a cloud of stuff that the solar system has picked up as it moves through space. It's called the Oort cloud or something. And Pluto hasn't cleared a path for itself. Pluto sort of shares a path with all kind of other just space dust. Pluto's cool, but it got demoted, and Mike Brown was like, oh man, they were gonna name it something else, and they were like, no, this is chaos. This is discord, and we're naming this body Eris.
Nice.
So yeah, I made a video on it, so I'd advise anyone who wanted to learn more to just do a search and check that out. But yeah, it usually pops in and shakes everything up. It's got a very Uranian quality. It's very resonant with Uranus in that way.
Interesting. Okay, can I go back in time and ask you about one more thing?
Oh yeah.
December 2019, I think that was the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, right?
Oh yeah.
So at the time, I was looking at it through just regular sidereal, and so I thought that it was happening in Capricorn, but constellationally, would that have been Sagittarius?
Sag, yeah.
Okay.
And Pluto was square Eris. Pluto made its first contact with Eris just as Saturn was making its contact with Pluto. So Eris was a big player in that. Yeah. I have to say that on the Sidereal Revolution group, a lot of us watched that alignment, that 2019, December 2019, early 2020 alignment, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction.
Yeah.
We were like, oh no. We all knew it was going to be bad, but no one really
That was sort of my experience with it. I was watching it for years, waiting for it, because It was like within a week of my Saturn return. So I learned about it
Oh,
early, and like through the whole journey of like going from tropical to sidereal even. And I was like, wow, this is gonna like fundamentally shake up the powers of the earth. And I was saying that to myself for like years, but then when it actually happened, it was whoa.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I wouldn't make any videos about 2020. People in my life were like, yeah, you're making videos now. You're doing astrology. Your stuff makes sense. You should make a video about 2020. I was like, no, I don't want to. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say about 2020. But I didn't know. I don't think anyone could have really, like, going back in retrospect, you can see that Jupiter was with the South Node, and South Node, especially in Vedic, is like a bringer of disease, a bringer of like, just chaos that comes out of nowhere, like no warning, no preamble, just psh. So that was the dispositor, right? The ruler of
Yeah.
Sag, and like then you have Eris in here with just chaos, and Sag is global, so we were really like, I still like have like a freezer full of meat. I have like water. I have like beans and rice. Like I was like stockpiling food. I
Mm-hmm.
was ready. Like I was ready to bug out. Like we did not know. Like nobody knew like what this thing was going to be. And I was like, just kind of like almost glad it was COVID because I was ready for like World War III. It was like,
Yeah.
holy crap,
Mm. Yeah, it was all at once, like everything that I knew it was going to be, but also not at all what I expected, you
Yeah,
know?
same here. Same here. Yeah. I've only talked to one person, so I think Jim Eshelman, who said, no, you can go back. I'm on record. I made predictions of like the effects of it. He didn't know what it was going to be, but he said the effects of it are going to be like broadly, like we're going to be confined. We're going to be like very contained. There's going to be economic like trouble. He like
Mhm.
really laid the whole thing out, and he did a very good job. Um, I think the most troubling thing about the whole thing isn't, COVID, like diseases come and go, Spanish flu came and went.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who like whine about masks, people who have conspiracies about, bioweapons in the vaccine. Just whatever, people get in their thought tunnels, and I appreciate that, but I'm not going to go there. My most like disconcerting thing about the whole event is that it's just so strongly like Capricornian, like it's
Mhm.
shifting the power structure so much to like the global corporate kind of like, just
Mhm.
like it really favors the empire,
Yeah,
um,
true.
the evil empire, and they know it, and they're like just shamelessly raking it in, just consolidating power, and I'm it's just interesting to watch, where we're going to go
Hmm.
from here and how it correlates with this sort of like idea that the age of Aquarius
Hmm.
and like a more egalitarian, like, like a
Yeah.
safer, weirder, like cooler world is approaching. It looks like we're gonna go through a little bit of like a dark night of the soul from the point of view of like individualism.
Hmm.
And I don't know. Yeah.
One thing I'm noticing, and like this could just be like the algorithm sending me uh like things that I've been interested in, right? Because I did a little like entrepreneurial course. But since that time, like within my sort of field, I've found, especially like young women, tons of them are starting to like go into business for themselves. And like I'm noticing a lot of people just like using the internet and resourcing that, and which I think is very, very important because we need to shift our economy from like constant consumption to you know, something else. So there's a lot of people offering like service-based kind of businesses online and starting their own businesses. And like, I don't know, maybe it's just the algorithm that I'm just seeing this now, but I do
Have you
think that
looked into it? Do you see any like correlations with like I don't know, I think of Lilith when I think of female empowerment, or I think of I mean, do you draw any parallels? Do you?
well, I do think that in like a strange sort of way, it is sort of Capricornian energy, you know, and sort of like resourcing that Jupiter to like find abundance and like sort of make it, uh, you know, from like from nothing to something, and two, I'm finding a lot of people sort of my age are going through a period of realizing that they really need to shift their mindset on money, you know, a little bit. Not necessarily giving it like the power to be evil, and recognizing that at its source, it's a neutral, neutral thing.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that shift too, right? Because I'm 43, and when I was coming up, it was like, oh, money. Let's just to hell with all that stuff. And then now there's like, and it's become evident to me too. I was actually just talking about this very thing earlier today. It's just become very evident. You can help people with money. You can do good with money. It's not, yeah. So I'm with you, and I can sort of see if you draw the connection to Capricorn and Saturn, that, you know, Uranus and Aries, this kind of, you know, like kind of drive, motivation, kind of just like the desire thing that Aries carries, that Uranus, which Uranus is a very Uranus is very gender equal. It's not Uranus is no friend of the patriarchy. It's in almost every case, Uranus will throw wrenches in every time it gets a wrench, it will throw it in the patriarchy's gears. And I don't see it supporting that sort of fundamental sort of oppression-based system in and of its own nature. So it's, you know, squaring Saturn, and that's neat. That's neat. I hadn't looked into it. That's what,
like going out on our own too, you know. I think that the women thing might be a part of the algorithm for sure, because I am also seeing, I'm in my field, just like lots of people in general that are sort of starting to like take a chance on like their own unique gifts. And I think that that's going to be really integral to, you know, shifting it from a dynamic of like we all just have to be wage slaves to sort of finding our own power through, I feel like, service to the greater good, which is kind of Aquarian type themes, I think, but
yeah, absolutely.
Like getting there through these sort of like Capricorn boss energy steps.
Yeah, taking responsibility, Capricorn, for ourselves. Aries is like, that's, you know, that's one expression of it.
And that's something with this, I was thinking about it in accordance to Neptune and Aquarius. I feel like in some ways, this whole idea that it is the age of Aquarius is kind of like holding on to the idea of a savior, you know? You know, hoping that it's all just going to trickle down and it's all going to be a beautiful thing. But at the end of the day, to see the change we want to see, we have to start showing up for ourselves and showing up for our community in order to
I love that, really. Yeah. Oh, sing it. Yeah, it all starts with close circles, close concentric circles, you know. That's the nice thing about seeing, like, oh, you know, the government, they're too busy arguing amongst themselves. Like the corporation doesn't care about me. But like when I go out And who do I want to get involved with? I want to like volunteer in my like local community garden. I want to get involved with the people in my neighborhood. And if everyone showed up for their right, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
If everyone just showed up for their own local community, like no one, I mean, we even need like, I don't know. I think that's like a very Aquarian idea, like kind of self-governance and autonomy and a bunch of individuated human beings who are just coming together in spontaneous ways to offer what they have to the people around them. Where the idea we have now is like more like structural kind of power over top down. Again, it's all more like it's a little bit Capricornian. It's really not Piscean. The Piscean thing is just a sort of a confusion around things and a kind of spiritual, like there's almost like a naivete to it, you know. So what you said too about savior complexes, I really resonate with, in that we all think of Aquarius as like, and I even said it in this world, like a better, cooler world is coming. And in some ways that may be true, but it's like not going to save anyone from the reality of like ground level life on Earth, you know. So I'm really feeling what I'm really like. I'm smelling what you're stepping in. I love it. It's true that people look to the future, especially Aquarius, especially people like us look to Aquarius, people who are, you know, I don't know, different from, you know, status quo reality. Look to Aquarius as like, oh yeah, that'll be great. And it's like, we'll see.
Yeah. It's interesting too, the traditional rulers that, I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but it's interesting that the traditional rulers of both Capricorn and Aquarius is Saturn.
Oh yeah. I was just listening to Stephen Forrest talk about Aquarius, and he's like, you know, I did a case study of Aquarius because he's a tropical guy. And so he was like, yeah, I found that they were actually really conservative. And I was like, okay, right. Because, you know, because they're actually Capricorn.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because Saturn ruled like Saturnalia, which was like a drunken fertility festival. Saturn has a lot of sides. Like Saturn is not just this like dark Satan figure who rules over, you know, dominating with an iron fist. So I think of all the ancient rulerships, I have the hardest time with that one. Saturn and Aquarius. I was glad because Uranus is a visible planet. You can see it with the naked eye. It's very faint and it moves very slowly. So many cultures didn't even notice it. But point of fact, you can see Uranus with the naked eye. And for that reason, I think like in the way that the world is straight up magical, actually, you know, sacred and mystical, I think that points to something. Like if that is within the conscious mind at the edges of it, maybe, you know, maybe the ancient Babylonians in all their wisdom were not, you know, complete in their knowledge. Maybe Saturn does rule Aquarius, and Saturn does have a really you know, totally opposite to its Capricorn side, because everything functions in polarity. Everything everything functions and expresses in duality.
I feel like the responsibility piece is like part of the piece that blends into Aquarius, you know. Maybe in the Capricorn it's more of a like striving to acquire, you know, and then sort of where it moves into Aquarius is the realization that like we need to take responsibility for ourselves and our communities in order to like fully individualize, maybe.
Yeah. In Capricorn, I think we're learning we fit in, how we conform, like necessarily, and we're valued for our ability to do the things.
Yeah.
And in Aquarius, we're valued for who we really are, independent of conformity and relationship. But they're both also really aloof. They're both really impersonal. Like Capricorn is very impersonal. It's like similar to Aquarius in that Saturnian way. It just doesn't. It's just not. It's not about. It's like if Leo takes everything personally and makes everything about themselves, and this is the classic Leo thing. And Cancer is like, oh, just so emotional that they just feel everything through the filter of their own kind of inner experience. Capricorn and Aquarius are just almost like an eagle looking down on everything, like just have this bird's eye view. So I see the similarities. Yeah, it's interesting. There've been some interesting discussions on the forums about like sort of if we could just put it all together from scratch, like knowing everything that we knew, like would Virgo really be Mercury's, or
that's
or
what
like
I've wondered about before.
And I love that. I love thinking outside the box about stuff. It doesn't even matter whether I'm right or whether anyone is.
Yeah, it's part of the experimentation process we're in.
That's just it. That's just it. Questioning the answers. Absolutely. And what about the planet that was between Mars and Jupiter in the ancient world? Was that given astrological importance?
There was a planet in
I think
between Mars and Jupiter?
Where the asteroid belt is, where Ceres and the asteroids are now. And I'm again, if I had known I was going to be interviewed today, I would have prepared. But I think the Babylonians called it Tiamat. Tiamat, and they said it was like a second sun. It was a water planet, and there's written record or oral record, and I think written, but I can't cite it. I'm unable to cite a text or an ancient whatever of its actual, like there were people that witnessed its destruction. And this may be like pseudoscience. This may be like, people have a lot of different takes on like Zechariah Sitchin and his like, cylinder seals and the stories of whatever. And I'm not going to make a statement from my own side on that, but I mean, even some people that are really taken as authorities on the ancient world are like, very questioned and very questionable. And I don't know. I don't have the information, but it would make sense. There's all these asteroids. Was there some kind of like catastrophe? Was there some kind of like impact event where what was a planet was then, distributed more broadly? And that's just I guess nobody really knows. So maybe it's not even worth going down too far down that rabbit hole. But it all interests me, just to think about things. Maybe I've heard people contest like Pluto's rulership of Scorpio, and then who rules Ophiuchus, and like in a lot of ways, we all have to come to our own understandings and interpretations. I don't think a consensus view of astrology that everyone would then be expected to adopt is ultimately the most helpful thing. I think that actually has the potential to hold.
I don't know, one wisdom that seems to be coming down big time the day that Saturn and Uranus were in square exact, which was actually the day I decided to make this show.
Oh, cool.
I don't know, I just kept on having these realizations that like life is messy, and that's fine.
Oh yeah.
you know, and it was
Yeah.
sort of oh, that's okay. That seemed like a revelation at the time,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah.
that's been some interesting medicine that I feel like is playing out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And will probably be like sort of a quality of this year since it happens again and again. But
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you're Virgo rising?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, for Virgo rising, the idea that life is messy can be like real, it's kind of a deal breaker. It's like, I don't know, life, I like you, but stay over there on your side. This is my side of the room.
Mhm.
It's tough. I'm a strong Virgo person myself, and it took me, yeah, there's like a need for like order and almost like as a
Like
perfectionist
categorization
streak.
and
Oh,
understanding.
yeah, yeah. And life resists that. It really, and that's the opposite of Virgo, Pisces, where things are just mysterious and you can't be known. It's like a dreamscape and ever shifting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Well, I don't want to keep you too terribly long on
Oh,
this
okay.
venture, but
Yeah, cool.
I had a really fun time chatting with you.
So what's your take on one of my questions that I'm constantly sort of mulling over here,
Mhm.
and turn the interview around
Okay, let's do
and
it.
ask you a question. What is your take on the rulership of or the reading of a fucus and the rulership of a fucus? And I'll just leave that there because there's I think for everyone who's watching this, there's the idea like that's the 13th sign, and it's
Mhm.
between Scorpio and Sag. So
I mean, to me, from a like instinctual place, like I feel like, and I haven't really spent time studying charts too much because I'm like dipping my toe in this whole 13th sign business. But like from an instinctual place, I feel like it has to do with Chiron somehow,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm.
sure, with the healing and the resurrection. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, I think there's a link there for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was
I have
thinking,
a I have a hard time with that because Chiron's so small. And
mm-hmm,
I have in my mind this idea like, well, a comet, a tiny, it's actually a centaur. It orbits
mm-hmm,
between Saturn and Uranus. This tiny little thing. There's even bigger centaurs than Chiron, right? Like
mm-hmm.
Chariklo is the biggest one, and it's well larger than Chiron. So Chiron's just like, it's
Just
not a planet at all. And I don't know how it would be resonant, but in the mythology, yeah, absolutely resonant. And there is undeniably a resonance. And
mm-hmm.
then then I wonder, because I spin out on this, I really do, but
Yeah,
I wonder, like, is it even helpful to think about rulership? Is rulership sort of a
that's something that I've
patriarchal
been
kind of
spinning
like
out on
power
lately
over?
too.
Yeah, totally. And I've
Mm-hmm.
come to talk about it actually, like, oh, Taurus, I don't say, oh, Taurus is ruled by Venus. I'll say Taurus is resonant with Venus and resonant with
Mm,
the second house. There's like a sympathetic vibration, right? So
yeah,
using a little more
I like
like
that.
updated. Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
So Chiron is resonant with a
Mm-hmm.
fucus, like
Big
full
time.
stop. Absolutely.
Even okay, because if we bring it back to Greek mythology, Ophiuchus is there's connections with Asclepius, right?
That was the Greek connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
And
Asclepius was
so,
tutored by Chiron.
and interesting, I'm just thinking with like the smallness, because wasn't part of Asclepius's story that like he was a human that was able to defy death, um, and then the gods revered him for it until
Mm,
like this bringing people back from the dead became a problem, and then they
right,
got
right,
upset about
right.
it again. But
I
it's
don't think,
interesting.
I think he was half human. I think he
Oh,
was
okay.
half God. I think he was the son of Apollo in the version that gets handed
Mhm.
down that way. But then he was given to Chiron because he had such healing potential. And there's some people that say if you go back far enough, that this person was female. And then you have whole other mythologies which have, in which the name Asclepius is like a meaningless name, but those
Yeah.
stars are still there.
Mm-hmm.
Like even before the Arabic world had heard of the myth of Asclepius, they were calling that star the snake charmer.
Mm-hmm.
So there, the serpent energy, and the idea of mastering serpent energy
Mm-hmm.
is that's there across several mythologies.
Mm-hmm.
But I sort of took what you were saying and like went hard right, and I want to get back
Oh.
because you were talking about
Well, I just think it's interesting, just drawing the parallel from talking about how it's just like this tiny small thing, I sort of, it wasn't one of the like full-blown gods that figured out how to defy death, it was someone a little more humble.
I like that.
Yeah, just thoughts.
Oh, that's cool. That's
I meant to brush up on this particular mythology a little bit before this interview, but I did not. So.
Oh no! You felt the question out there.
But no, I think there's definitely some sort of resonance with Chiron. One interesting thought that I was having in the sort of, from the context of Greek mythology, right? Because Scorpio is the scorpion that was sent to kill Orion. Am I right in that one?
I don't know.
I think so. I don't know where I'm going with this. It's just an interesting sort of thought I was having. I know that like Orion was sort of struck down because he'd gotten like, he had a hubris about him, and he was too good and the gods were offended, so they struck him down. And I was thinking about this interesting like hubris connection between like being struck down because of hubris and then sort of having like the hubris to be like, no, I'm not accepting that. I'm not accepting this death. I'm going to transform it and get back up. It's like a hubris of an entirely different nature,
Well, one of the reasons the Greek myths interest me so little is actually because it's kind of hubris the whole way around. Like you have Pluto, Hades, who was like in the underworld, who was like, oh, I'm not getting enough souls. Who's this guy? He's going against the flow of nature. He's like Asclepius, right? He's raising the dead. And Hades had the audacity to just put a hit on him. Like, we got to kill this guy. He's helping too many people and I need souls. Like the whole thing is just like sort of egotism and arrogance and all the major players are men, and I just it's just kind of hard to reconcile the whole Greek mythology thing.
I was having a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine who studies like the ancient Greek devotionals and is like really, really digging into the actual devotional texts. And she brought up a very good point, which was our understanding of mythology as it is comes from multiple different sources, because there's like the actual devotional texts, but then a lot of it is actually just pop culture. There's things that were plays that have now been worked into our understanding of Greek mythology when like it was a play. Like some of it was kind of like really elevated fan fiction. And that's kind of something interesting.
That's perfect. I like that.
Do you have any good sources on like digging back further? Like if I wanted to learn more about the Babylonian type stuff, where do I look?
There's a guy named Otto Neugebauer who wrote on the history and the ancient practice of astrology, but his books are dense and academic and expensive. I came to acquire them through like peer-to-peer networks. I don't, if anyone's on Amazon, like, let me look up Otto Neugebauer, and it's like, what? That's not me. I'm not I'm not that guy who
Yeah.
pays, you know, $1,000
Oh wow,
for
really
for a
expensive.
oh, it's like out of print, rare stuff. He's, you know, he's really seminal work, but you know, finding digital copies is possible. But there's a great Wikipedia page on Babylonian star catalogs, and it goes back to the 18 uneven signs that the Babylonians used. And Scorpio and Ophiuchus were called the cutter. They were the raptor, which is why in tarot you see the four symbols, like in the wheel, the four figures at the corner, and in the world, the signifying completion, the four animals at the corner. You have the bull for Aldebaran, Alpha Taurus. You have the lion for Regulus, Alpha Leo. You have Fomalhaut in it's actually Alpha Pisces Australis, but it's the fish just below Aquarius that the water's poured onto, but it's in the degree of Aquarius. So it's this bright star. These are the four watchers at the corners, the four archangel stars. And of course, the fourth is Antares, what we call Antares Alpha Scorpio. But the fourth character is not a scorpion. And you see these in the stelas of churches. You see these four characters, the bull, the lion, the human, and the eagle. And this is like, you know, this is sidereal mythology. These were the four archangels and the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the four watchers at the corner. It's the same, right? You know, higher and lower manifestations.
Yeah.
And these were just, you know, this was Regulus, Fomalhaut, Aldebaran, and Antares. And so this has always been like a really key area of the sky, like really important. To the ancient Babylonians, it was a raptor, right? The eagle. And it was kind of the stars, as far as I can tell, the stars of Ophiuchus, and not Ras Al Hag, which is well north of the ecliptic, but very bright, very significant. But the stars that the whole thing, Scorpio Ophiuchus, what we call Scorpio Ophiuchus now, was like an eagle, a raptor. But in the Arabic, and the Arabic contribution to astronomy and astrology, the Arabic people saved our star knowledge. Like when Rome fell and the Dark Ages came, like the Arabs were like, have fun up there, you know, we're going to keep this thing going. And to them, as far as I can tell, even Libra was the claws of the scorpion. So the scorpion was like extended even in the Arabic zodiac, in the ancient Arabic zodiac, as far as I understand it presently. It was a scorpion, but they also saw Ophiuchus as this separate constellation, the snake charmer. So there's all these you know, like you said, across mythologies and different ways of looking at it. But the ancient Babylonian looked at it as a raptor, and the information's out there at there's a great Wikipedia page, Babylonian star catalogs. I want to say Kenneth Bowser is a great source. Like his introduction to Western sidereal astrology is tremendously valuable, but he doesn't really get into the Babylonian constellations. I'll just shout him out, and I'll recommend that book to anyone who wants to get into sidereal astrology. It's like, it's a profoundly helpful work and easier to read than Oda Nujabauer. Yeah, it's one of the more interesting parts of the sky, because everyone kind of had this weird different take on it, but there's similarities, you know. And it's an eagle, it's a scorpion, you know, both will, you know, tear you up. Both are like, you know, very predatory, kind of dangerous energies. I like the archetype of the eagle for that a lot, because it contains sort of the higher qualities. And I like reading Ophiuchus related to Scorpio, because it talks about these kind of higher more visionary, medicinal, sort of mystical, deep kind of Kundalini oriented qualities of this whole thing. Did you know that Pluto is actually a dual planet? Pluto's moon is about half its size. So if Pluto's like this, moon is like that. And the center of gravity is in between them. So they orbit like each other. Yeah.
I did not know
And
that.
Pluto manifests like almost exclusively in dualistic ways through polarity and duality. Even if there's two extremes that you're experiencing at the same time, like that's Pluto. And I think that Charon, which is Pluto's moon, and Charon was also a lord of the underworld, like a death figure.
Isn't he the one who like rode people in, the boat keeper or something?
No, who was that? I don't think so, but I'm actually not sure because I can't think of that figure's name. But I do know that Pluto, like astronomically, like actually, like actual planet Pluto is a dual and is involved. Like if Uranus's word is transformation, just sort of change, right? Pluto's about like transmutation, like caterpillar to butterfly, like really like taking things to a whole different state. And for that reason, I wonder if Pluto rules Scorpio, if Charon wouldn't be the ruler of Ophiuchus, and there might be this sort of like quality of them being connected through this sort of one just leading like in a cause effect way to the other through the process.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I like to question. I sort of like to question everything too. I'm an Aquarius rising, so we get that. Like,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fun.
Totally.
I think
Thank you.
I think we're like well beyond an hour now. So.
Oh, that's cool. You can edit. You feel free to, take.
I'll probably just leave it.
Cool. I hope your series is really successful.
Yeah, I'm really excited to just like dig into more conversations, and I hope I can find more people open to talking to me, but I think I'll be able to. I think
just reach out. Just
in this community there seems to be just like a real curiosity and desire to learn. So
and I think there's a shared interest in like getting the word out. Like, this is what it is. This is what we do. This is actually a thing. Like, this is significant and important. And it's not something that we just made up on like an acid trip. This goes back to like ancient Babylon. This is like how the Maya did it. This is how, all the star watching cultures, the astronomical.
I'm really interested in digging into the roots more, because there is definitely a perception that this is like, and in some ways we really are breaking new ground, but there's also this perception that like, NASA, who doesn't know anything about astrology, just times, and like now we're on a bunch of bullshit,
Yeah, there is. That would be a great topic for another show, I think, just sort of setting the record straight. But you know what to do, Rio. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity and just sort of surprising me.
Thank you for being so open to the surprise.
Oh yeah, totally. I think it's great, kind of a like a pop-up, just kind of a flash interview.
Yeah.
Hey, want to be on YouTube?
Yeah, surprise. Cool. Well, thank you for joining me, and I will start recording now.
Sweet.
Hi everyone, I hope that you enjoyed that episode. Like I said in the intro, if any of you would like to be on the show, have something interesting that you're doing, let's get together, let's talk. Reach out. I would love to hear from you. If you want to hear more like this, like and subscribe. I've got this YouTube channel as well as Podcasts will be up soon on everywhere that you get your podcasts. And you can find me on Instagram at Cosmic Wizard Astro. Yeah. Talk to y'all later.